Tony Bagley. On Halloween night of 1994, Tony Bagley went door-to-door trick-or-treating dressed in a skeleton costume. He was walking ahead of his sister, aunt, and mother when he approached a street corner towards the next house. At the same time, at 6:15 p.m., a man wearing a hooded sweatsuit ran into the street and opened fire on the Bagley family. Witnesses told investigators that the gunman then jumped into a waiting car and left the area with the car headlights off. Tony, a second grader at Fitzgerald Elementary School, was shot in the head. His 10-year-old sister, Chanel Bagley, his mother, Lachelle Cooper, and an aunt, who asked to remain unnamed, were also peppered with gunfire. Chanel required surgery to remove part of her liver, while the aunt, who was shot in the leg, and mother, who was struck in the chest, were treated and released. Tony was placed on life support and later died. At face value, the shootings appeared premeditated, targeting the Bagleys. Northtown, as the city is nicknamed, is known for being gang-infested, although police have stopped short of connecting the crimes to gangs. The only description of the shooter was that he was a 5-foot 8-inch African-American man who was wearing a dark-colored jogging suit. The killer vanished into the night, leaving a cold trail behind him. Theories varied, with the most prominent being that another family member, not the Bagleys that night, had been the intended target. That theory, however, never panned out for investigators. Then Lieutenant Mike Blackwell with the North Las Vegas Police Department said instead that the shooting may have been in retaliation for a drug deal gone bad. The case was so frustrating for police and family because there were no real leads. Police went so far as to call on a psychic for help. Tony's mother flew to Los Angeles with a detective to talk to the psychic. The Bagley family found new hope when Tony's story was broadcast 4 months later on America's Most Wanted. But Ivy Van Allen, a publicist for the program, said afterwards, "We didn't get any calls." The murder still remains unsolved. The murders of Ronald Sisman and Elizabeth Platzman. Sometime during the early morning Halloween hours of 1981, a Manhattan couple named Ronald Sisman and Elizabeth Platzman were murdered in their apartment, which was located near Greenwich Village. They had been beaten severely and shot once in the back of their heads at close range. The apartment had been ransacked, apparently by the killer or killers, in search for something. Sisman and Platzman's identifications were missing. Police initially suspected that the murder was drug-related. Actress Melanie Haller had accused Sisman of forcing her to take drugs in May of 1980, although the case was soon dropped. However, things soon got weird when a prison informant told the authorities that one of his fellow inmates had predicted the crime weeks before it happened. The inmate turned out to be David Berkowitz, also known as the son of Sam Killer. Apparently, Berkowitz told the informant he belonged to a satanic cult that planned to perform a ritual murder in a photographer's apartment near Greenwich. Cult members were going to beat the couple living there, shoot them in the back of the head, then ransack the apartment. Berkowitz said the man who lived in the apartment had photographic evidence of one of the Son of Sam murders, and cult members were afraid he would turn it over to the police to get out of a drug charge. Although Berkowitz accurately described Sisman and Platzman's apartment, there was not enough evidence to corroborate his claim. The case officially remains unsolved. Jong Song. Jong Song, also known as Cindy, was born in South Korea in 1980. In 1995, however, she moved to the United States to live with relatives in Springfield, Virginia. On Halloween in 2001, Pennsylvania State University senior Cindy Song went to a costume party at Players Nightclub with two close friends, Stacy Pak and Lisa Kim. Cindy was dressed as a Playboy bunny. All three friends partied until 2 a.m. the next morning, when they then left and stopped off at a friend's apartment. Then, at 4 a.m. that morning, they left and dropped Cindy off at her apartment. That was the last time she was ever seen. Her friends reported her missing on November 4th. A search of her apartment found no signs of a struggle or forced entry. Song may have made it inside her apartment before she went missing. Her backpack and cell phone, which she had been carrying with her that night, were found there, as were the false eyelashes she had worn for her Halloween costume. Her keys and her purse were both missing, though. Authorities believed that she left her apartment to go to a 24-hour supermarket and that she was abducted there or as she walked home. Another theory was that she left her apartment with someone she knew and was then killed by them. Her credit cards, which were in her purse, have not been used since her disappearance. There have been a few leads, but none of them have resulted in any concrete evidence as to what may have happened to Song. Not too long after Song's disappearance, for example, a woman in Philadelphia reported seeing someone matching Song's description in a vehicle with a man. The woman, who may or may not have been Song, appeared to be asking for help. The man and the vehicle were never located. Stranger still, however, is this. In 2003, police discovered the remains of at least 5 different people buried in the backyard of Hugo Selinski of Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. According to DNA tests, none of the remains belonged to Song, but an informant has told police that Selinski and another man, Michael Jason Kurowski Jr., had allegedly abducted and killed a woman matching Song's description from the area in which she was last seen. Kurowski could not corroborate this claim, however, as he was among the remains found in Selinski's yard. Selinski was convicted of this murder and that of his girlfriend, Tammy Fassett, in 2015. It's still not known whether Selinski is responsible for Song's disappearance. A $27,000 reward is still available for this unsolved case. Chaim Weiss. On the morning of November 1st, 1986, a 15-year-old Jewish boy named Chaim Weiss was found murdered in his school dormitory in Long Beach, New York. Chaim was an Orthodox Jew who lived in the dormitory of his yeshiva, a school that emphasizes the religious and ethical principles of Orthodox Judaism. Police learned that Chaim had died from being struck violently in the back of his head with an unknown object. There appeared to be no evidence of robbery, nor signs of a struggle. Because it was Saturday, the Sabbath, police were unable to question many of the students and teachers at the school. As the days went on, many were still reluctant to talk to investigators. In Chaim's room, several clues were found to suggest that the killer was familiar with the yeshiva and the customs of Orthodox Judaism. It appeared that Chaim had been killed while he slept. His body was then moved twice, from the bed to the floor, and then from one spot on the floor to another. In Orthodox customs, it was necessary for the body to be taken off the bed and onto the floor, so that it is at its lowest and coolest point. Chaim's window was left open, even though it was cold outside. Orthodox traditions require a door or window be left open of the room of a deceased person in order to let the spirit out. After the murder, a memorial candle was placed in the room, and it was sealed. 2 days later, however, another candle mysteriously appeared. No one admitted to placing the candle in the room. Police tried to piece together the last night of Chaim's life. They learned that Chaim was an outgoing student who did well in his class. He had attended the yeshiva for the past 2 years. On the night of October 31st, he had left class with his friends to attend services. Afterwards, he returned to the dormitory. Several hours later, 2 of his classmates saw him reading in the hallway. This was customary, as the students did not leave lights on in their room on the Sabbath. He was last seen alive at 1 a.m. on November 1st. Although no students reported hearing anything suspicious around the time of the murder, one student did remember his door being quickly opened and closed at some point. At the time, he assumed it was just his roommate. A few days after the murder, investigators called a meeting with the students and some of the rabbis, asking for any information about the case. However, nobody offered any information. The investigators learned that their religion prevented them from coming forward unless they had evidence or another witness to back up their claims. Police eventually polygraphed 40 students and several of the teachers and rabbis. However, no useful information was ever found. Chaim's family are still hoping that someone will now come forward. Sadly, Chaim's murder has never been solved. Joel Loveleen. On October 27, 2007, 38-year-old Joel Loveleen and his fiancée, Heather Eastling, went to a Halloween party at the Broken Drum Lounge, a casino in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Joel wore a green jersey and went as a player of his favorite hockey team, the Fighting Sioux, while Heather dressed as a mechanic. That same night, the Saturday before Halloween, a large group of around 40 to 50 young people had chartered a party bus to chauffeur them around the city's many watering holes. The bus eventually stopped at the Broken Drum Bar while Joel and Heather were there. At around 11:30 p.m., Joel stepped outside to take a phone call. Upon returning to Heather, Joel mentioned that somebody got left on the bus and that he was going to step back outside to go check on him. Shortly thereafter, Joel was found laying unresponsive in the parking lot. He was rushed to the hospital but would tragically be pronounced dead from his injuries. Doctors determined that he had been severely beaten. Bones in his face were broken, and he ultimately had choked on his own blood. The only physical evidence found was something yellow that resembled a paw, which may have come from a lion costume. Witnesses said that in addition to the lion, other costumed individuals were at the scene, including a cowboy, a clown, a gangster, and a construction worker. Within 2 days, 23-year-old nursing student Travis Stay showed up to the police station. He verified being at the Broken Drum on the night of Joel's death, but he became so intoxicated that there was a 1-hour time period where he could not remember anything. Travis claimed he recalled being punched by a man dressed like a hunter in the parking lot before blacking out, and the next thing he remembered, he was arriving at his apartment in a taxi. When he was questioned, Travis had bruises on his face and cuts on his hand, but was certain he had not harmed anybody. He willingly turned over his shoes, which had blood on them, and allowed police to search his apartment, where they found a yellow sweatshirt with blood on it in the trash. While the blood on Travis's shoes belonged to him, DNA testing revealed that the blood on the sweatshirt belonged to Joel Loveleen. He was subsequently charged with Joel's murder. At trial, Travis's defense team maintained that since he was only 5'9" and 160 pounds, and Joel was 6'4" and 240 pounds, Travis was not capable of beating him to death, particularly since Joel had no offensive wounds on his hands. Travis had injuries to his hands. However, a doctor that examined him a week later testified that the injuries were superficial abrasions and that he did not observe swelling and discoloration, bruising, or stiffness, which would be more consistent with injuries from beating somebody. The doctor also testified that he had found particles of grit in Travis's cuts, suggesting that they had been caused from a fall. They acknowledged that Travis was likely in the parking lot when Joel was killed, but pointed towards other suspects as being responsible. Travis had arrived at the Broken Drum on a party bus containing 40 to 50 people in Halloween costumes. The men from the party bus later claimed that Travis had grabbed James Wavera, who dressed as a hunter, by the collar and pulled him to the ground without provocation. James and Travis had struggled on the ground for a bit. Travis tried to punch James, but missed, while James threw a punch back and connected with Travis's face. After the fight was broken up, Bryce Larson, who had been dressed as a cowboy, told Travis that he wasn't allowed to get back on the bus. The party bus was gone by the time the police arrived at the Broken Drum. Authorities located 23-year-old Bryce Larson, who was the organizer of the party bus. When approached by police at another bar, Larson was very uncooperative and aggressive and allegedly mentioned Joel's green hockey jersey before he was even told what had happened. Police also tracked down the upset clown, identified as 22-year-old John Diesel, who officers observed crying on 2 occasions and noted that his hands were shaking. According to police reports, John stated, "I guess things got out of hand tonight." It was found out later on that Bryce, along with 2 of his friends, had again attempted to confront Travis and, quote, wanted to give him some grief. The friends accompanying Bryce were later identified as Mitchell Dalhin, 23, who was wearing a gangster rapper costume, and Josh Diesel, 23, who was dressed up as a construction worker. However, according to their court testimonies, neither Bryce, Mitchell, nor Josh would exchange any further words with Travis because Big Joel Loveleen in his bright green hockey jersey had now appeared at the Lion's side. Instead, the 2 sides supposedly had only had a friendly conversation before the 3 men hopped on the bus and left the scene. At the trial, Travis's defense team put all of their focus on the party bus, alleging that Larson and his 2 friends, Mitchell and Josh, John Diesel's brother, planned to teach Travis a lesson for his attack on James Wavra. When Joel attempted to intervene, the trio wound up beating Joel to death, causing his blood to spill on Travis's clothing. They also produced surveillance footage from inside the Broken Drum, which showed John Diesel, the clown, exiting the bar 3.5 minutes after Joel went outside for the final time. Since Diesel was established as being on the party bus when it left the scene, this meant the bus was still parked there for several minutes while Joel was outside, leaving ample time for him to be beaten up by Larson and his friends. The prosecution also produced a witness from that night named Steve Rossica, who claimed that Travis, in his lion costume, started to follow him and eventually attempted to punch him in the face without provocation. The man was able to easily move out of the way and noticed that Travis seemed very intoxicated as he fell to the ground. However, the defense team used this incident to their advantage, stating that if Travis was so drunk that he fell over while attempting to punch both James Wavra and Steve Rossica, how would he have been capable of beating Joel Loveleen to death? After a 9-day trial and 5 hours of jury deliberation, Travis Stay was acquitted of all charges, and authorities found no physical evidence linking any of the other men from the party bus to Joel's attack. Police could not find a witness from the party bus that saw anyone with blood on them or anyone who looked like they'd been in a fight. The men from the party bus, including the 3 that Travis's defense team implicated as guilty, Bryce, Mitchell, and Josh, have maintained that they are innocent and had nothing to do with hurting Joel. As for now, the case remains unsolved.